We're going to be talking about Piaget's theory today. We're going to be talking about several different aspects of Piaget's theory, but the first thing that I'd like to do is to talk about Piaget's theory just sort of as an overview in the practical sense for how we use that in the classroom. One of the things that we need to think about is the terminology that goes along with Piaget's theory. The first thing is that we must understand that Piaget's theory, this idea of constructivist approach to our cognitive development, happens as a result of the experiences that we have. So when we have an experience, we have certain characteristics of that experience that express them. Since I walk through a parking lot and I see a sedan that I'm used to seeing, or maybe I see a station wagon. But now there's something else. There's an SUV there. So there are different characteristics for different kinds of cars, for instance. And what I need to do is I need to think in terms of what are the characteristics of that particular concept that I'm going to hold on to. I'm going to look at those characteristics. And then as I think about those, my job will be to either recognize them as things that I already know and I'm comfortable with, and I can kind of clump those together with those things that I already know, or to recognize that they are significantly different, at least enough significantly different to me that I'll need to do something different with them. So the next concepts we have are the concepts of schema, and schema is it's that framework upon which we hang the knowledge that we get about something. It is our conceptual understanding of something. And then we have disequilibrium, which is when I have an experience and I see parts of that experience that are different. How do I give myself a level of comfort? So when I get to that point, what I'm looking at is these other two concepts called equilibrium and disequilibrium. Disequilibrium is the idea that I'm not real comfortable with the way things are. I am cognitively a little upset, perhaps, when I don't know something and I want to know more about it. That's when this disequilibrium sets in. The next thing is equilibrium, and that's sort of the opposite of disequilibrium. That's when I feel pretty comfortable with where I am, with what I know, and with where I've put maybe the characteristics of these things, which we'll get to when we talk about assimilation accommodation in just a second. But this idea of equilibration is the process that we use to get from disequilibrium to equilibrium. And Piaget would say that we do that by this process of figuring out what the characteristics are of an experience we've had, then taking those characteristics and either saying, yes, I do recognize those things, they seem similar to me, and if that's the case, then I will assimilate those characteristics in total, really. I'll assimilate those characteristics into my extant schema, the schema that I already have, that I feel like I can relate it to. Or if I look at it and I say, I really don't think I understand that. I don't think I've been here before. Then I will accommodate. And accommodation really is simply the idea that there is enough that's different about this experience that I've just had that I really need to change the way that I view it. And I need to create a new schema for whatever this new concept is. Now, if we go back to this idea, well, we'll go back there in just a second. If I make the wrong decision, if I make a decision that I want to assimilate rather than accommodate, or accommodate rather than assimilate, either way, if I do that incorrectly, then I may create a misconception in my understanding. I may get to the point where I've sort of built a faulty foundation conceptually, and then I have to go from there and deal with that faulty conception. So here's the process. Piaget's assimilation and accommodation begins with this notion of experience. And experience, as I said, is going to be evaluated by me, and I'm going to say, okay, I've been here before, or I really haven't been here before. I'll say to myself, does this fit into my extant schema? And if the answer is yes, then I will go over and assimilate. If the answer is no, then I will accommodate. That is, assimilating is incorporating those characteristics into my extant schema, just sort of allowing it to grow that way. Accommodation is creating a new or modifying a schema radically so that I understand it to be different. Now, I started with this idea of cars. Let's try that again. Let's say that I look at a car, and this car has, in my schema, I have, let's say I have a very young person schema, and I have 4 wheels, a steering wheel, an engine. We'll leave it at that. And I go into a parking lot, and I see a truck. Well, if it's a pickup truck, as an adult, as a more seasoned learner, I might have a different schema that would include that. But for right now, if I'm a young learner and my schema for car is the 4 wheels and the steering wheel and the engine, then I look at the pickup truck. It fits my schema. It has all those characteristics. The thing that we have a problem with as teachers is that we have frequently more developed schema in the area that we're trying to teach. And because we have that, we recognize that there is a need for, rather than what just happened, which would be assimilation, there is a need for accommodation, that that student now really needs to figure out a schema for truck, a schema for pickup truck maybe. So if the student makes the wrong decision, then later on I'm going to have to go back and sort of debunk. There's a theory called conceptual change theory, and it was initiated by some folks out on the West Coast named Posner, Strike, Hewson, and Gertzog, and they came up with this idea. Really, it is a follow-up to Piaget's constructivist notion, and what he says, or what they say, is that we have to go all the way back to the point of the misconception, to the point of that wrong decision about assimilation or accommodation. And at that point, we have to correct the student and then rebuild the concept from there. So as you can see, it's very important to get it right and to make sure that students create the right, or make the right decision and create the right schema as they're going through the initial phases of instruction, where we have these spirally based curricula. Math and science in particular are spirally based throughout the standards, in national standards as well as in most state standard documents. And if we make a mistake early on, that mistake will continue. It will persist throughout the other grades until somebody, some wise teacher, realizes that there's a problem and they have to change that. Now, Piaget's theory will have 4 different stages in it. The 4 stages are sensory motor, which is 0 to 2 years, or 0 to 24 months, during which time there's a lot of development, but we're going to be practical about our application here, and we're going to assume that as a regular classroom teacher, the likelihood of you having somebody who is pre-operation, or excuse me, who is sensory motor, is pretty low. And we're going to assume that if you're a special education teacher, which would be the most likely place where you would find students who are still sensory motor, you probably have a lot better diagnostic information about that student to base what you're going to do on, to base your whole practice on, than you would be able to get by using some diagnostic tools out of Piaget's theory. So, with either condition, we're going to skip sensory motor and move through pre-operations, which is grades or ages 2 to 7 or so, then concrete operations, which Piaget says is 7 to 11, and formal operations, which is 11 to adult.